I've been in the industry a long time. Most recently with Waldom, but I was 10 years with TTI before that. I came in and I cleaned up Phil's mess, for that short period of time. Yeah, he said it was a life-changing moment for him, but it was even more for me. Just kidding, Phil. You know that. Prior to that, I was with Arrow for quite a few years. I came into Arrow through an acquisition of Pioneer. So I go back. I actually started in this industry November of 1984. And I'll talk a little bit about that. You didn't know I was that old, did you? Oh, yeah, I am. I'm very old. What I did is I tied together. You'll hear a lot of things that you've heard throughout the day. Part of what Phil, some of the things he brought up, I could give you almost identical stories that I've experienced through my career. Obviously, it's a different time today than it was when I got into the industry. This industry had lots of opportunities. I was like a kid in a candy store, and you could advance because there were a lot more companies. So I'm not sure we have the same opportunities today. But what I did is I went back and sort of said, hey, what were some of the things that helped me make me successful during my career? And I'll go through some of those, and I'm glad to say that Dr. Shawn, I've got her list. If they would have let me edited my presentation, I could have changed some of it, but it's a lot of the things that she talked about this morning. And I'm glad I had not seen that some were more male than female, because I think that may have skewed me a little bit. So I'm going to jump in and talk about value-based leadership. But before I do, Phil mentioned this, leadership and management. I've sat down and talked with many people that worked with me, for me, or that I worked with. And when they started talking about management and leadership, it was all about having a group of people that work for you. That's not what leadership and management is really about. If you look at it, the management's the technical work of doing things. There's good managers out there that have no people that work for them on the technical aspects of the business. But the leadership piece of it, there's people in this room that have led me through my career. Maybe some of them know it, some of them don't know it, and they never worked for me. There's people part of the Waldom organization now. I've been with Waldom, I don't know, feels like about 10 years with all the travel, but about a year and a half now. But yet, I've got Karen who has had to teach me. I came into a business that was similar but not the same. I would say that she demonstrated great leadership in trying to acclimate me to a new part of the business. But to me, leadership is really about the values that I use in order to influence an organization, whether it's people I work with, or people that work for me, or people that I work for, or people in the industry that, none of those apply. I think leadership we use every single day. Here's a quote that I found when I was doing a little bit of research here. And I happen to believe that all of us, our leadership is based on the values that we've come to know. I'll go through some of mine. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation at lunch, and I mentioned one of the values that I was not very good at early in my career. And I happen to believe some of these values, you pick up and you learn the hard way. I do believe the values, there's a combination of your own personal values, the values of the people that you work with, and the values of your company. And values of a company are not what's written on a website or in a document. It's what you see the people in the company doing. Phil mentioned, being visible. I happen to agree 100% with that. But it's one thing for me to say that I want to be visible. It's another thing to have visited, 20 countries in the past year. And that's part of being visible. I was in Taiwan, and Phil was at the airport while I was going into his office in Taiwan. We didn't know we were in the same region of the world. If you look at value-based leadership, it's the idea that it's based on leaders, and the leadership style is all based on the values that we've grown up with. Some my mom and dad, I'll say, instilled upon me. Some of the things in my personal life, like Phil mentioned, be it a spouse, mother, father, kids, you name it. But a big portion is that the core values of the organization. I pulled this out because I'm new to Walden. Year and a half is not enough to even learn that much about the company. But here were the core values that I'm now striving to make sure that I fit within these. Truthfully, a lot of the decision of me to go to work and leave a great job for what I consider is another great job was, did I fit culturally? When we talk about values or core values of a company, we're really talking about the culture of a company. TTI has got a great culture. It's a family organization that I felt very much at home. But I didn't want to leave one great culture and move into a new company, regardless of how good I thought the opportunity was, without understanding did I fit within the culture. So if you look at these, I'm not going to go through them. I looked, and I've been around long enough to know, were these words on a website, on a brochure, or were they actually lived? And I think I've already seen signs, and I'll give you some examples along the way. There are many values we can talk about. What I did is I picked out a few that I think have helped my career. And as I said, I led off with taking risk. That was the number one. I actually put it number one because I do think that my ability in order to take educated risk, not just all gut feel risk, I think have paid off, and I'll give you some of those a little bit later. Building meaningful relationships. I hate the word networking. I think I told Jackie that. I don't like that word because it feels too contrived. I look at it that this industry has been great to me. The relationships that I've built over the years, seem to help me every day. But a lot of those relationships, they weren't built because I wanted something out of them. I genuinely like people, even Michael. I like Michael a lot. And I could tell some stories on him that would make you question why I like him. I like his sense of humor, but meaningful is the key word in there. Lead by example. I'll give you a couple of examples there. Consider the perspective of the other person's view. Really what I'm talking about there, I've used this term for many years, wear the other person's shoes. So I'll get into some details there, and that's something that I'll say I learned the hard way. Open and honest communication, setting big goals, self-awareness, and soliciting and taking feedback. That's hard for all of us. Personal growth, promote yourself, which is probably makes some of you guys feel a little uncomfortable in here. Self-discipline and persistence, and then learning from failures. Phil mentioned it, early that, all of our careers, we've all had ups and downs. But I think you'll see as I go through some of the examples that I put into this presentation, the learning and the advancement and the opportunities came more from the failures than they did from the big success stories. Taking risks, going for it. I look at it and I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and my career. I got into this industry in my 20s, so I was still relatively young. I got in because I had a lot of friends that I went out and drank with. I was not in the industry. I was an assistant manager for a supermarket. All right. I took a cut and pay to go to work in this industry. To this day, I don't know why I did that. I don't. I can't answer it. At 20-something years old, how much money I made, it mattered. And it's not like I was making that much that I had everything I wanted, but I had everything I needed, I'd say. But I did. I took a cut and pay in order to go. That was a risk, taking it. Later on in my career, I was a regional vice president for Pioneer. I got a call one day, and I'm running, it's a $100 million region. So in today's standards, not that big. Back then, it was a pretty good sized region. I got a call and said, hey, we've got this great little business. Pioneer owned this business. We opened it up in Europe. Of course, I'm thinking Paris, London, some big city or whatever. It was in Dusseldorf, Germany is where it was at. And we want you to go run it. It was less than a $3 million business. But for whatever reason, I took it and said, hey, I'll go try that. That was a risk. I mean, I had a pretty good career, with a good company. And I went over. And Arrow bought the company within 1 year after I moved there, which was pretty interesting. But most recently, if you look at taking risk, if I hadn't done some of those things, I definitely probably may not even still be in the industry. I may have gone and done something else. But I took some risks that gave me experiences. That little $3 million business, I finished opening it up and made it pan-European, and it's, I don't know how big it is today. It was about 50 million when I left it. I went back and ran that overall business that Arrow left standalone for almost 10 years. It was a $375 million business that made a lot of money. It's a great model, really great model. But I learned how to run a standalone business, all aspects of a business. So, if you go look at it, you're going to miss 100% of the shots that you never take. So if anything, especially for this group, because I've had a lot of experience with people in my organization, especially females, that seem to be reluctant to take some of those risks, to take that shot. And that's the first thing I would give you. Think about it. Get the support you need in order to take the risk. Just one last comment on the career. I got asked this question quite a bit because I was running a, $2.1, $2.2 billion business at TTI. Had a great position, great company, great respect. It's owned by Berkshire Hathaway, so I got to even meet Warren every now and then. But I went to work for a company that at the time, it probably was about 175, 180 million. Not really a misunderstood model, because we only sell, you saw the commercial, we only sell to distributors. We don't sell to end customers. That sort of narrows the market down. Those distributors can buy that product from the supplier directly. So our value prop has to be strong. But I got asked that question, why go? Part of it was taking that risk because I wanted in order to be able to build a business. And it's been fun. The business is definitely bigger than it was. We signed quite a few new lines, so we got a lot of things going in the right direction. Building meaningful relationships. This is where I learned this morning, you guys are better at that. I think I already knew that. I think some of this industry, I think, is pretty good at it. But I don't think, and I think this is very important because relationships have changed. COVID and the virtual meetings, emails, all of that kind of interface, that's all part of it. But the relationship itself, I still believe it's a face-to-face in order to build it. You can maintain it in those other ways. So I think this is critical to any kind of success that any of us have had. Even in our industry, the whole was becoming much more impersonal. And it's catapulted, 100 times worse than that today. So, I'll say the example of building those relationships. I'm going to go back and give you this one here. A little bit, and I referenced that commercial back when I was at TTI. We went out and we went on a road show to where we went out to go visit customers, to go reconnect with customers. So and not just me, I took my entire executive team. They didn't get a vote, they got to go. And we were flying into different markets every week. And we went in and we met with hundreds of customers that had not seen somebody at that level within the company. But you know what? When I switched jobs and went to Walden, I bet you 100 of those people, customers, called me. They wanted to buy from me, and I told them I couldn't sell to them. But they did. But I mean, building those kind of relationships, that was not the purpose of going out there. But that's how important those relationships are. And going out, and obviously I'm looking at it from a customer standpoint, but what do you think about every one of those branch locations that we went out and met with every single person? At Walden, I've been around the world a few times in a year. I've met with every employee, including the 9 interns that started 3 weeks ago. I think our young student mentioned it before. It's a personal relationship. So this is what I consider probably the foundation of what our industry is built on and what's going to keep it going. Leading by example, I'll say be willing to do what others don't. There's lots of examples I could talk, the travel piece of it, of being, I wanted the organization to go out and become visible. Well, I had to lead by example and go out and do that. But, the example that I will give you here that's probably more important for this group, dealing with those hard people. I heard somebody mention it earlier today. I think it may have been Dr. Sean. You've got people in the organization that are, maybe Phil mentioned it also, that are probably, good employees. They output it looks good and everything, but they're not right for the organization. I learned, I'll say the hard way. I've let some of those early in my career stay around too long, and I lost a lot of other people. Probably one of the hardest people decisions or actions to take. I learned later on that I started asking myself, I'll say for the betterment of the whole, if I should get rid of those people that are toxic to the organization. So, that challenge to you, lead by example. If you're sitting here talking about somebody else in the organization that's not dealing, with their hard people, then think about, have you dealt with the hard people? And have you dealt with them timely? So I'm actually better at it. It may sound a little cold or cruel or whatever, but is it fair to the 100 other people that they have to work with in order to keep them on? Consider the other person's views or put yourself in their shoes. I've used this one quite a bit. This is one that I had to learn the hard way. These are two real guys that worked for me when I was a manager right in the beginning. Steve Hoover and Greg Haney. I'm still friends with them today. I'm originally from Atlanta, so this is a Georgia accent, not a Texas accent. But Steve Hoover and Greg Haney, I was brought in and promoted from within. I went through a period of time, that new manager, I was successful. I could go out and sell really, really well. And both of them, did well, but they didn't do it the same way I did. So I really tried to force them into doing things the way that I do. I learned, the hard way. I lost those two guys. Greg Haney he went more on the hardware and software side, a very successful sales executive. Steve Hoover, I believe, is within the Arrow organization. He went and had a long career in a rep organization in the Southeast. But they both are still in the industry and still very, very successful, and they would have been very successful with me if I had just considered that, hey, their way of doing it, my way of doing it, although different, they both worked. The communication aspect of this business, and I think most of the people in this room, the female part of our industry is much better. It all starts with listening. I watch how you guys operate in this room compared to some other conferences that I've been to. You listen better than anybody else. You respect. When you do ask a question, you listen for the answer. I can't say that from the male side of this industry that we are all as good at that. So it all starts there. But communication, it needs to be open, transparent, open and honest. When I was at Arrow, that was part of the grippy that we used to have for every meeting. And I'd say that Arrow was probably pretty good at that. Sometimes that comes across as being a little cruel, but that open and honest. I've made the mistakes early in my career to where I sugarcoated things and maybe didn't give the proper feedback, on a review. Maybe I said, okay, I'm not going to put it in writing, but the truth is I was doing an injustice to the person. So the whole transparency of it and open, honest, and I use, if you were to see my notes, it'd say the brutal honesty sometimes. I'm going to tell you a story where communication got me through. That company that I talked about that I went to Europe on and then came back to the U.S., Power and Signal Group, that Arrow still has the logo and everything. I think they've integrated a lot of it now. But that business was a $375 million business in 2008. Very profitable. A few things happened in the industry out of our control. It was built on a one supplier relationship. It was built on Delphi Connection Systems, which is called Aptiv today. It was almost like an exclusive distributorship. Which, those distributors, we all love to have those because you end up in control. You're not really competing as hard. But a lot of it was sold into the transportation or into the automotive industry. And if you go back and think back to those times, Delphi filed bankruptcy in 2005. It took them almost 5 years, I believe, in order to get out of the bankruptcy. So the one supplier I have. GM filed bankruptcy in 2008. So I'm sitting here in an industry that is, dying. I've got a business that was $375 million, that going through this was no longer $375 million. It dropped below $250 million. I had to displace a lot of people. I probably got rid of more jobs during that part of my career than all the rest of it combined in order to keep that business afloat. But the way I got through it, and I don't think any of the people that were with me at the time, I was very transparent and open. I stood up in front of the people and said, here are the financials. Here's what they look like. Here's what it is. Here's what's happening in the Delphi. And I did that every week for months and months. It was the hardest probably time of my career, but I think I came through it better only because I was transparent and honest with the people. I had people come up who were thinking about retiring that said, you know what, how about if I help you out? I think I'm going to retire now instead of waiting 6 more months. So the communication piece of it, again, open and honest. Setting lofty goals, setting those big goals. I just moved not too long ago, and I found I'd gone to a workshop to where I had set my career aspirations in the late 80s. I found the document where they make you write down what position you wanted, how much money, the scope of the responsibility, all these things. Well, I missed it. I look at it, and not that I thought it was a big number at the time. They pay me more than that now. I'll just tell you that. The role was to be VP of Sales of Pioneer way back then. That was my career aspirations, and I thought it was really, really big. Don't be afraid to set those big goals. I look at it at Waldom. Waldom was a $180 million business. We've got a goal to get the business to $500 million. All right, that makes some people uncomfortable. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. What happens if we miss and we only come up with $400 million? We're a lot bigger than we were, as long as you're doing the right things. So don't be afraid to set those goals. Self-awareness, and that's seeking and accepting feedback. Self-awareness, this is where I run in, and we were having a conversation earlier to where, I've had candidates for jobs, and we were talking about the differences between men and women. I've had some male candidates come in, and they want, it's a VP of whatever, and somebody comes in and they actually have almost none of the skills required. None. Oh, yeah. And no, I'm ready for it, let's go. And on the flip side, I've had female candidates come in, and they've got 92.3% of them, and they don't think they're ready. So think about it a little bit, when you're going after a job or applying for a new position. Be willing in order to be aware, truly aware of yourself, seeking that feedback. Some of the feedback you want, some of it you don't want. I'm going to share it. This is a real employee appraisal that I got. This is something, it was actually, I looked at the date on it. It's actually 32 years ago exactly today. Yeah. I didn't realize that this, again, I was moving, cleaning out some files. But this is a man named Harold Jeffers, was like a regional VP or something at the time. He gave me this review, and I still remember the conversation that I had with him. I was still that new manager, and that, I think Phil referenced it earlier, I was one of those asshole guys you talked about. Well, but and I can remember the conversation. He said it may feel like you're having to do it all yourself, but the whole we versus I piece of it. I didn't like getting that feedback, but you know what? I took that feedback, and it made me better. It made me understand, what being truly a team player, appreciating all the work and the good things. So as I said earlier, some of the values that I have today did not come from, me just knowing that. It came from bad, I'll say bad things. At the time, I'm sure I don't remember exactly how I responded, but I'm sure I was not happy. Yeah. Personal growth, self-development, continuing to invest in yourself. I'm going to talk a little bit, and you guys, the mentorships, the training, everything that's available through or through other industry organizations or through your own companies. But before when I talk about investing in yourself, it's a lot more than just the work stuff. I look at it that there's a lot of things. Invest in yourself both, physically and mentally. I was in the gym this morning, and there's a group of people that I see everywhere I go. They're in that gym every morning. And, so they're investing in themselves. So don't forget that piece of it. Even as old as I get, I still go down and I feel better when I do that. So keep investing in yourself in all aspects. Some of the things, the mentorship program, I like the formality of what we has done, and I do believe that the industry needs more structure in it. I've had a couple of mentors, some formal, many non or informal. I look at it, Vinny Vellucci, when Arrow bought Pioneer, Vinny was the mentor that was assigned to me, and Vinny invested time in it. And he wasn't trained in it. It wasn't like it, but he picked up the phone and called. He showed up, and he helped me to make sure I knew how to navigate into a new company with a radically different culture than what I'd been in. And I still remember that, and I still text Vinny on his birthday and talk to him and have dinner with him every year or two. So he's made an impact in my life. I'll tell you a story. You guys, take some of this on yourself. I've got a guy in Singapore. In fact, I don't even think I've ever told anybody this. This guy visited his company, and he's a young, I'll say very intelligent guy. His father owns the company, and it's a very successful distributor in Southeast Asia. I've met him one time. He called me after one time, and I related to him, and he's an interesting guy. He's actually getting an executive MBA. Every month, I have a 1-hour call with him because he asked. He's in a rough spot in that his dad owns the company, and he, has nobody to go to at all. So don't be shy in order to raise your hand. And, it can be as formal as him. Hey, would you mind? I don't know. I didn't know this guy from anyway. But you know what? His initiative, I spend 1 hour every month with him in order to talk about what he's got going on. Take advantage of this. Don't forget your companies. If you look at it, TTI's got, I don't know, is it TTI University? Is that what it's called? Yeah, but it's got a lot of content. And even Walden, a much smaller business, we've got access to all of that. And so all of your companies have access to a lot of resources in order for you to invest in yourself. This one is the one that'll make you, the self-promotion piece of it. You guys are not good at this at all. We are. Males are much better at the self-promotion. But don't take it, I've had people that have come in and said, well, why didn't you ask me to take this job? Or why didn't you come ask, if I had this skill? Again, some of that is on me. Some of that's on the company to ask. But don't be afraid in order to, hey, do you have 15 minutes and let me tell you this project, what skills I got from it. Those things stick and go. So self-promotion, but you got to learn, there's a balance. That arrogance, or you still have to remain humble there. The self-discipline and persistence, these are two that I'll say I think my career's been built on. I'm all about it. If you need to get up and be somewhere every day and it needs to be at 4:30, then let's go do it. Phil gave the example of a customer that he went every Wednesday. Alan Bradley was my customer. And I was given an account that Pioneer couldn't do any business in. They did none, and it was the big account. But the caveat was it was a 4-hour drive away from Atlanta. It was in Dublin, Georgia. All right. And there was nothing in Dublin, Georgia. Nothing. And so every other week for over 1 year, I got in the car at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I drove and I sat. Now, I was able to get appointments, but they didn't give me any quotes or give me any orders until the day that they did. And the first order was $1 million worth of Intel. And it was the same thing. Well, we were testing you to see if you were, all work, or were you really going to do it? So that discipline and that persistence in order, turned it into one of Pioneer's biggest accounts. And don't be afraid of failure. I hear, some of the conversation at the table I was at today and others, and I've heard it over time. You guys are a little more risk averse, but if you go look at it, I can't even think of all the failures I've had in my career. Some of them that I showed you today. Definitely I've learned more from the failures than I have from the successes. And I've been part of some great organizations. And sometimes when you end up and lead with your values and you stay true to them, don't deviate from them. I mean, if you go look at it, I've learned the hard way that it's just easier, and Phil said it earlier, if you tell the truth all the time and you just do what you feel everything, sometimes you can lead people up. Most of these people do not work for me, even though I am the CEO. We've got only one actually reports directly to me. 2 of them are board members. And we all came together and we climbed Kilimanjaro just a couple of months ago, using a lot of those same leadership values. You talk about persistence and everything. So if you look at it, these values and the way you make decisions and the way you lead people, they work in all aspects of your business. So I do have a couple of questions for you guys to take with you, because most people never think about these things unless you're at some kind of leadership conference. What values have made you successful? What ones have worked well and what ones have not? How about the values of your organization? Do they align with your own personal values? If they don't, where's the disconnect? Is it you, or is it the company? Is it the leadership of the company? So I think you have to think about some of those things. Obviously, the leadership values that I talked about have helped me do okay in this industry, and hopefully I can keep using them to do okay for a few more years. And I'll stop there. And then, am I going to open up questions now, or just hold them till later? All right. Any questions or comments? Anybody work with me? I will tell in the past, did I cry BS on some of those? Because at some point in my career, I would have cried BS on some of them.
So, excuse me. You talked about moving from TCI to Walden, and a part of your decision making, a part of you taking that leap was the wanting to accept a new challenge. Can you talk about potentially what that challenge was and what you knew it to be, and then also if you could talk about stages in your career, like when it's important to take those types of leaps and those types of challenges. I don't know if there's a definitive answer for that, but I'm just curious to hear what you say.
No. If you look at it, when I was at TTI, I was running the Americas part of the business, which is, it's where the business started. It's over a couple $2 billion. We had grown it. When Phil, you left, it was probably what, 1.1 billion? Yeah. So, and then we grew it. We basically doubled it in a few years. So, my normal answer would be to tell you the TTI business was a more mature business, so it was less of a growth business. Those numbers don't back that up. But the truth is, it is a much more mature business. And there's a big difference of running a company like Walden. It's got a unique value prop, but it's got growth potential. And although if it grows from 180 to 500 million, that is much harder than growing TTI. TTI had the foundation up underneath it, had a lot of great people in the organization. Well, thank you. They've already paid me. So I can't say that job was easier than what the job I do today is. It's easier in a lot of ways, harder in some, I guess. So if you look at it, the opportunity for that to be able to take a business and to grow it was a big portion of the reason. Obviously, TTI has a very, I'll say, structured succession plan. And Mike Morton took over as CEO, and after 40 plus years with the company, he should have been. And he took over when Paul Andrews, the founder of the company, passed away. So the opportunity for me to ever have that same opportunity at TTI, unless I was willing to work until I was 75 years old, but in the TTI world, that is not no. You got to remember, it's owned by Berkshire Hathaway, and you got, Warren's just turned, 92, 93? Yeah, and he still works hard. And you've got Charlie Munger, his partner, who will be 100 his next birthday. All right, so they go look at it that, and I was very clear, I'm not working until I'm 75 years old. Yeah, and that would have been, I'll say a big portion. That opportunity, because Mike had to sign up for a period of time, and then I wasn't going to be willing to sign up for that same period of time. But through your career, can you say that, hey, look, this opportunity came up. I was not looking in order to go do something else. A lot of these things come up, and you have to be willing to analyze it and ask yourself, is it the right time? Yeah, because at most time, when you do decide that it's time to go do something else, the right opportunity probably will not come around. Yeah. Yes?
You had talked about your values in your career. How would you describe you can stay true to your values? So sometimes there's times you get pushed to cut corners, and then your values may be pushed, where you may have to put that aside. But how do you stay true to your real values?
Truthfully, it's gotten easier the older I've gotten. Early in my career, it was much, much harder. But it's, Phil said it earlier, if you do try to cut a corner, whether it's a white lie or whether it's, I'll say giving in to your value, it's not worth it. I mean, at Walden, I've changed some things there that didn't fit with what I saw were the core values of the company. And it cost, we walked away from millions of dollars worth of business. Millions. All right, and a not very large company. But I wanted to be able to go up in front of any distributor and say I only sold to distributors. I also wanted to be able to say that it was only for authorized product, which had not always been the case. So, you just, you get to that point to where it's just not worth it in order to go the other route. Now, if you're in a company to where you're not, I'm lucky that I'm able to call the shots. I report to a board of directors. So it's not like I have somebody in the day-to-day business. So I can make that. But if you're part of an organization that they're trying to get you to cut those corners or to compromise, that could be an inflection point to where you need to think about, am I at the right place? And companies change.
Hey, Don.
Hey.
Question about, you made a calculated kind of somewhat known quantity risk, but there were a lot of things that you didn't know going from a multi-billion-dollar company to a company, $170 million company. For you, what has been the largest challenge, and how have you handled it in terms of resources? Less money, more nimble teams, less people and resources to do things?
Well, yeah, if you look at it, people are always the challenge because they're the one resource that can make the difference. And, there were parts of this business that were, I'll say, well-funded. There were parts of it that were not. If you look at it, parts of the organization had been invested in. Europe had done a great job. I've got a group of people there in Amsterdam, I don't know, probably 50-plus people that are there now, and a lot of thought had been put into succession planning. They bring in 20 interns a year, 40 different countries represented, so it's a very diverse group of people. Matter of fact, I'm in the minority to go when I go there. It's many more women, most of the women leadership in the leadership positions. We've got work to do here in the U.S., and a lot of it is not that we just didn't make the investment. So we're going through that process, as we speak.
So you had made a comment about face-to-face meetings, bringing more meaningful relationships. I happen to agree with you on that. But it seems like the industry is going just the opposite, where it's probably 50-50 today, virtual versus face-to-face. Do you see that changing?
I think it needs to change. Our industry is going to, obviously I'm committed to it. I'm not kidding when I say I've been in 20 countries in the past year. I've visited every major distributor in every part of the world, every supplier in every part of the world that's on our line card. And that's how much, I believe that it needs to be there. I think you can do Obviously, the videos of being able to do Teams or Zoom calls, I think will work and help, but I don't think that you build a relationship that way. You can maintain them maybe, or at least parts of them. But the industry itself, I think we will see some reversal, because I think you're going to see it miss. And no different than in 1990 when that commercial for United, it became an impersonal business because they were doing it via fax and email. It's just, we just added different dimensions. I think we've got to use everything that we have. I will tell you that I was in a studio not too long ago to where, and Michael will like this, they're creating an avatar for me. But it's me. It's AI generated to where it's a video, to where they videoed me for, I don't know, a long period of time. I just did, I don't know how many hours worth of voice to where they're going to use my voice. But then I can go out and actually deliver any message with a script that I can write. And it's me presenting, and it's good technology. That's where I think that will go in to help with the communication, again, to help maintain it. I'm doing it more because of the multilingual aspect of it. Can you hear this southern accent speaking Mandarin? Yeah. It's coming. It's coming. That's it. They don't know I have an accent over there. Somebody have another question? Can I tell on you, Phil? When Phil joined, yes, absolutely. There are different demands, but when Phil joined TTI, Phil came in the end of the first quarter. He came up and I think you'd already asked everybody, and you came to me to ask again. Yeah, it's the end of the quarter. What do we need to do to close the quarter? And I told him, same thing you did yesterday. Even though TTI is part of a public company, TTI operates like a private company. It did not change. Berkshire Hathaway does not manage. Obviously, Arrow, that I was part of, I got, at the end of the quarter, you got $50 million worth of inventory you need to take out. And oh, by the way, you got to do it in 3 weeks. Yeah. And again, those are the demands. So the stress levels, they're different, but they're, I'd say, in a public company, much, much harder. That's where, if you go look at it, some of the values are altered in that environment in Arrow. And I'll be very transparent with you. That was part of the decision in order to leave Arrow for me. I was being asked to do things that I thought would damage the business long term, and I thought it damaged the people. And, and again, I think they run the business different today than they did at that point, but at that point it was all for Wall Street. And, I think adjustments have been made. But Phil runs his public company much different than it probably was run 15 years ago too.